There's 3 areas that I'm going to briefly touch on, because you don't hear a lot about this, but it's really, really important. Most of the research, the double-blind studies, the gold star research that's done, focuses on these 3 areas when it comes to intervention for children with neurodevelopmental challenges. So joint attention, social reciprocity, and imitation. So we're going to take a little look at what this looks like in the classroom, at home. So joint attention is simply the ability to share attention with another towards the same object or event. Now, many of us are aware of this because if we have a intimate partner at home, and it's an evening where we want to watch TV, and one person wants to watch hockey, and the other person will sit there and watch hockey, or they'll be in the room with the person watching hockey. But their attention will be on something else because they're not that interested in hockey. So sometimes, even though we're together with the person, joint attention isn't in the room because we're not jointly attending to the same thing because we don't have the same interest. So that happens on a daily basis. But it's more pronounced in individuals with neurodiverse challenges. So the only goal of joint attention is to share thoughts, ideas, memories, observations, and experiences with another person. Sounds simple. However, in neurodiverse individuals, it's impaired. What that can look like on the school ground, joint attention, is the individual gets upset, has a bit of a meltdown, and when they move their hand like this, it hits a peer who's on the ground crying. They don't know they did that. And the peer says, Johnny hit me and it hurt. And Johnny goes, I didn't hit anybody. I never hit anybody. Because Johnny, in the moment of being with the sensory or whatever triggered the upset, is not attending to anything else. So he doesn't know he hit that person. So I'll never forget the day with my son. He was about 6. And he was in the gym. And gyms are noisy. And they're hard to be in. But he had got to the point where he could be in the gym. And they're in the gym and they're doing whatever they're doing. And somebody fell and was crying. And it was the first time he went and noticed. Jointly attended. I came to pick him up at the end of the day, and there was this lineup of teachers and educational assistants with this massive smiles on their faces. And I thought, well, it's got to be good, whatever it is. And because they knew that the moment that he noticed and went over to look and see why they were crying, he had created a whole new paradigm for living. And his outcome in the future was already altered. We never know when those moments are coming. We just keep believing and we just keep working with them because we don't want to stop 5 minutes before the miracle's going to happen. So I just keep going. So that was joint attention. Social reciprocity, that's where we start to go from back and forth with our gestures, with our play, with our attention. And there are deficits in social reciprocity for those of us who are neurodiverse. So sometimes it means we don't get involved in social games. We prefer solitary activities or using a person's hand as a tool or a person as a mechanical object. You know, like I remember when my kids, it looked like they liked to be hugged, but it wasn't a hug. It was that they could put their face in my area here and cut off stimulation so that they could regroup and stay in the environment. But it looked like they loved hugs, but it actually wasn't reciprocal. Right? And even when one of my sons learned to play baseball, and we'd throw the ball back and forth, I still didn't know whether it was just that he learned rote learning or whether he was reciprocating. I couldn't tell. I just kept hoping that one day it would be, even though the action looks the same, that it would actually be reciprocation and it wouldn't just be, oh yeah, right, she showed me the ball, so I'm supposed to throw it back. Like that. Okay? Because when we start to look in relationships, it's like, oh, well, they scratched my back, so I guess I should scratch theirs back. Which is not reciprocation. It's not reciprocal. It's just rote learning of modeling. There we go. So, so this may lead to not noticing another person's distress or lack of interest in a focus or a topic of conversation. So there's different ways to support these individuals. When we say contextual support, that means we're looking at the context that we're in. So for some of our kids, they are more comfortable in the library than they are in the gym. And the library has a different context than the gym. And the rules are different. So we have to explain those. And then there's the environmental arrangement. So what that looks like is whenever I came to the school, because my son was melting down in some way, the first thing I did was look, what's he seeing? Oh, that's a pretty bright light. That light there could ruin the day. What's he hearing? We'd be in the mall. Oh, the Sally Ann, the Christmas bell, way down at the other end of the mall. But he could hear that. As a matter of fact, he could hear every sound. He couldn't filter them. So 20 minutes in the mall, we were done, because he couldn't filter any sounds. And I remember my older son saying, why is he screaming? I don't get it. And I said to him, I want you to stop and I want you to listen and I want you to name all the sounds you hear. And he named about 15. I said, well, he hears them all at once. That's why we have to go. And so we went. I would look at, what's the smell? How close is he to other people? Who touched? One time I came, he was beside himself, and it was like, what happened? And the teacher said, well, we got a box of Smarties, we put them on we went for a walk, it was the educational assistant. We got a box of Smarties, we came back, we put them on a paper towel, and we shared them with all of his peers. Wow. Okay, I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Because he couldn't, it's his, and he couldn't do the sharing piece yet. Because, hey, let's be honest, sharing is a good idea, but if I have a whole chocolate bar and I share it with you, I only have half. Let's be honest. Doesn't look like such a good idea. Right? Okay. So balanced turn taking, and that's where sometimes that might even be two people on one of those little trampolines. One person jumps twice, this person jumps twice, and even though your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, might not seem like a big deal, that's communication. Your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, then it becomes, we can move it into dialogue. So one of my boys learned communication. A lady was doing a master's program in autism, music, and communication years ago. We were so fortunate to be part of that. And so they started out with 2 drums, and she would he'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then she'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then eventually she could go 1, 2, and he could go 1, 2, 1, 1. But then when it became 1, 2, 3, 4, that was huge. That we actually got to the point where they could turn take. So it started in drumming and turned into communication. And then eventually they were able to share the same drum. And then they were able to move to hands and different rhythms. But that way of relating, he got connection. He didn't have to look in their face. He didn't have to say a word. But he got the first sense of connection with another human being in communication through that means. Okay? So that's balanced turn taking. Time delay, what that looks like is they learn something. Like I say, okay, I'm gonna jump first. Let's say we're on a trampoline, so I jump, and then they say jump and they jump. And the next time I go, jump, jump. I'm not jumping. And to see if they can actually, even though there's a time delay, can they actually jump without me having to jump again? Those kinds of things. And sometimes we can take a repetitive behavior, like there's a kitchen unit in the kindergarten room, let's say. And they're up at the door and they're kind of banging at the door. That's all that's going on. But you and I can come up and we can turn that isolated behavior into interaction. They're banging on the door and there might be another door on the kitchen unit, so then we do the same thing on the other door, and we're kind of mimicking their behavior. And then eventually we might say, can I bang on your door? Do you want to bang on my door? That's reciprocal. So we went from a repetitive behavior to an interaction. The difference that will make years later, as simple as it seems, it's hard to even express. Imitation plays a crucial role in the development of cognitive and social communication. And there's a lot of evidence supporting that. Even though it's a hard one to understand, there's a lot of research being done because they really do believe that it's a primary deficit that has a profound effect on learning and development in children, which has made it a very, very important focus of intervention. Okay. Modeling involves demonstrating words, phrases. So these are like examples of how we can support them. Objects and activities the child is interested in. And so sometimes we actually have to initiate the joint attention, but what we want to do is eventually figure out how we can get them to initiate it. So when I ran a daycare when they were young, because I thought 8 hours of socialization is probably a good idea. So I stopped and I ran a daycare and I took babies. And the first baby I had, as they grew, they learned language. And as they learned language, I was able to see things that my children weren't doing. Now we're going back 20 years, before ABA, before LOVAS, before autism funding. So we had to be very creative because there wasn't anything other than what we made up. It was fun. So when I say that, when I saw the little children, they would go, juice, juice. And I went, my children don't do that. And so then for the next week, every time he wanted juice, I would take his hand and put it there and go, juice, juice. And within a month, he was able to go, juice, juice. Now, I had no idea that I was actually putting something in that wasn't in. I just thought, he doesn't do that. Let's teach him that. So I was modeling how to request and be the one to learn that behavior. When we say contingent imitation, what we mean by that is we want to imitate the child to promote reciprocal interaction. So that's what we talked about with the door of the little kitchen unit. Once the child is engaged, the strategy may be to enhance interaction, if they're still calm. Might have taken, the fact that they connected with us on that door might have used up everything they have for the day. For the rest of the day, they're going to be just doing a favorite activity because it might have taken that much. Prompting and fading. And of course, we know it's okay to prompt, but eventually we have to fade the prompts. What that can look like is, let's say we have a thing of shapes, a thing that we're going to put shapes in. And we have they're all triangles, but they're different color triangles. And so here's how we fade the prompt. At first, we pick it up and we go triangle, and they put it in. Then the next time we say blue. They're all triangles, blue. And if they pick up the blue triangle and put it in, we've just faded a prompt because we didn't have to say blue triangle. But if they don't get it when we say blue, we have to go back and say blue triangle. We put it in, then we say yellow. And if they actually pick up the yellow triangle, we've actually faded a prompt. Because like we said, we don't want to be prompting them in the bedroom with their intimate partner. We want them to be able to do that for themselves whenever possible. Let's see, repetition, we know that's absolutely key. Now, even though we know that's key, when it comes to sexuality, we don't want to follow this. We don't want to provide multiple opportunities to say penis, vagina. No, we don't want that, right? But it takes the same level of repetition. We don't want to be repeating, especially when they get into the teen years. We don't want to be repeating the questions they have and the answers we need to give them, but they need the repetition to build the skills. And then there's what we call behavioral momentum. And what that looks like is they're learning something, so we want them to keep doing it better. And so sometimes what it looks like is they start out simple and then we do what we call gentle stretching. So behavioral momentum. My son was in kindergarten. I got a call to come to the school because he was having a meltdown. He's 5. And I got there and I said, what happened? Because he was hyperlexic. He could read anything you put in front of him, and sometimes just to have a moment to have a coffee, I'd give him the phone book. John Brown, 2 cents. John Brown, right? He could do that for hours. Extraordinary ability to decode words. Didn't understand any of it at the time. So we had to build a relationship to comprehension. But I got to the school. I said, what happened? And the teacher said, well, I asked him to read this last paragraph. And he said no. And I looked at him and I said, remember one of the rules, we need to listen to the teacher. And I said to the teacher, you can leave that with me, we won't be leaving till he does that paragraph. Now I had a daycare child with me, which was great. They were so good. So we go outside and we run around the school a couple of times because we got to get him calm. We sit on the swing and we read one sentence, then he blows up again. We've got 4 sentences to do. We run around again, we come back, we get him calm, we read sentence 2. An hour later, we go to the teacher. He says, I'm done. It's called gentle stretching. And then, as we're going home, I said, what did you learn today? I must listen to the teacher. 2 hours. Right? And that was just one little part of the day. But that's called behavioral momentum, where we're taking a behavior and we've gotten so far, but we're going to go further, and then we're going to keep it going. So he learned, we're not leaving till it's done. I was fortunate enough to be able to be home so we could play life like that. And I got up every day and said, my job is to make sure that my patience outlasts your will. That's the game today. And that was the game every day. You know. So that's the background of everything we're going to talk about today. Joint attention, social reciprocity, imitation. Critical, critical, critical. And all the research supports that. And you're already working on it. Just keep going and keep looking at how to build it to the next level.